What's up everybody, Super Dorks fan here for another car review. This is of course the 2004 Honda S2000. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for hooking me up with this car to review for you guys today. So about the S2000, well I already reviewed a 2002 S2000, which was the AP1 generation, the first generation. This is the second generation, the first year of it, and as you can see, there's obviously just the minor tweaks. It's not a huge change. You have different headlights there, different front bumper, you have the different wheels. In the back, you just have a rear bumper that's slightly tweaked and those new taillights. And that's just about it. But I mean, this car was beautiful from the very beginning and there wasn't much need for much of a refresh. And you know, the proportions are still just so beautiful with the long hood. And it's so small too in person. It's so lean and just, it's such a beautiful car. And I think even now, 11 years later, it still stands the test of time as being a beautiful car. Right, for the interior of the S2000, well, it's basically identical to the interior in the 2002 that I reviewed already, aside from the gauges. But first, sitting down in these seats, they're very nice. They actually have really good thigh support, and the torso support's pretty good too. You know, there's a little bit of wiggle room here, but not too much, and they actually hold you in really nicely whenever you're driving. Next is the steering wheel in this car, which is almost miniature size with how small it feels. It's a very tiny little wheel, but it's a really nice thickness. It's not overly thick, but it really feels meaty, and you know, it's a very basic wheel. Of course, there's no buttons aside from the cruise control, but I mean, 9-3 grip is perfect. 10-2 notches are almost not even noticeable, but they're there. But I mean, that 9-3 grip is great, and this wheel just feels so nice in your hands. Right, so for the gauges in the S2000, so you know, for the second generation here, they actually lowered the red line in the 2004 and on S2000s from 9,000 RPMs to a slightly less crazy 8,000 RPMs, and so you'll see that reflected here on the tachometer, which has a lower red line, and it's a slightly less exaggerated design of the tachometer. In the first generation, it went all the way across the whole gauge cluster here. Here, it's not quite as exaggerated, but you still have the great digital speedometer in the middle, and your digital fuel and coolant gauges as well, and you know, gives you a clock, and that's it. You know, nothing you don't need, but you know, just the basics, and that's very cool. Speaking of just the basics, this car is about as basic as it gets, not in a bad way. It's just very puristic in its design. So you know, forget about a regular center dashboard like most cars have. In this car, you have your audio controls over here to the left of the steering wheel, where you also see your cool engine start button, and then on the right hand side here, you have your temperature controls for air conditioning and fan speed, and that's just about it. But that's all you need. It's all, of course, very driver-centric. Forget about the passenger changing the radio, except they can come down here where the radio is actually held. It's nicely hidden away, and you have your standard single DIN head unit here that obviously no thrills. It's just the basic stuff, but it gets the job done. And you know, with these cars sounding as good as they do, you don't really need a radio anyway. As far as storage space goes in the S2000, it's actually better than you would expect. So you know, same deal. If you've watched the previous S2000 review, you know about all this already. But so you have these tiny little pockets here in the doors that are usable for holding probably 3 packs of gum, and that's about it. And then you have this center thing that I'm assuming they want to be a cup holder, yet it's square. So yes, cup holders, I guess. They hold my sunglasses nicely, so there's that. You have this padded armrest that's very, very thinly padded. It probably isn't the most comfortable to rest your elbow on forever, but it is there. Then you have your rear compartment here where you will find your trunk release as well as a little cubby, but that's not all. You can hit this and lift up this whole thing, and that's where your owner's manual and all that's stored, and that's a fairly deep pocket, and there's 2 of them there, and that's essential because there's no glove box in this car. Normally I don't talk about glove boxes, but this one doesn't have one, so that's where you put all your glove box stuff. As far as trunk space goes in the S2000, it's small. You know, I mean, you could probably set of golf clubs in there. You can maybe squeeze 2 smaller suitcases, 1 full-size suitcase. That's about it. Obviously, you know, not a long-distance traveler, this car, but you know, it's enough for 2 people, you know, for a weekend or something like that. All right, so start up and go for a drive. Still has the basic key, even though you have the engine start button, so it's interesting. You put the key in like you're normally going to start a car, you turn it, that turns on the accessories, then you hit the engine start button, and it starts up. Alright, so setting off in the 2004 Honda S2000. So many first impressions you get right off the bat. First is that this car is tiny. The other things that you notice right off the bat is the clutch is very light in this car. The shifter is very, very short. Hondas are famous for having very short shifters. This one is delightful, though it's so precise already. The clutch is nice and light too, so it's very easy to use. And other things that you notice right off the bat are visibility, of course, is very good. Hood, even though it's long, it drops down nicely so that you still see the hood a little bit, but you don't ever have to look out over it or anything. It still sits very low. And of course, with the top down, there's no blind spots. You can see around you perfectly. But the one thing though is, you know, with the top up, there is a blind spot. And that's one thing you have to keep in mind if you're going to be, you know, driving this car every day and all seasons. But you know, if you're just doing it as a weekend car, visibility is great. Going over these bumps now though, it's actually pretty good. So, you know, I mean, you would think that a tiny little sports car like this would be really raw feeling, but it actually soaks up bumps pretty nicely, and it's very comfortable. You feel everything in the road. You know, it's slightly firm, but it's not so much that it's uncomfortable or anything. It's actually a very smooth ride. Another thing that you do notice right off the bat is the squeaks and rattles in this leather. I mean, this one has 67,000 miles, so it could just be from this leather sitting out in the sun or whatever, but it squeaks so much, and this seat belt is constantly rubbing against the leather on the seat. All right, so let's turn on to this back right here and see how it does. Of this Honda motor. Oh man, so it feels really great. The one thing is this motor for 2004 had an increase in displacement from 2 liters to 2.2, so it's bumped up the torque a little bit. Now the torque is only bumped up by 6%. It's an extra 9 pounds-feet of torque, so now we have 162 pounds-feet of torque in this car instead of 153. The horsepower though has stayed the same throughout all the years at 240 horsepower, which is a very healthy amount for a tiny little car that weighs, you know, 2,800 pounds, which is roughly the same weight as a BRZ or an FRS. I mean, obviously it's still more than a Miata, but I think a Miata probably weighs less than my microwave, so it's kind of hard to beat the Miata on weight. But I mean, this thing though, just on corners, it's just so good. I mean, the steering in this car should be the benchmark for the world. I mean, it's just so precise, so much feel, the perfect weight. I love the steering in this car, and the handling, it's nearly telepathic. I mean, there's a little bit of a wiggle, but it's like, it's the fun kind of wiggle that you enjoy. It's not like you're fighting against it, you're working with it. Oh man. Coming up to this tight corner I always take, not expecting any body roll. No, this thing just feels like a go-kart around here. That's the quickest I've gone around that in a while. Oh man, this thing is such a good handler. Such a fun car. Alright, so let's see about this power again, shall we? And I have to say it, is because the red line is 1,000 RPM shorter, it's not quite as dramatic. I'd say this is about 80 to 85% of the experience you get in the AP1 as far as the engine is concerned. I mean, it's still really fun. I still really like the way that it revs out. I mean, 8,000 is still a super high red line, way more than most cars, but it's a little bit less extreme, which makes me giggle just a little bit less, and it's just not quite as wild as the first one is, but still a ton of fun, of course, and you still have this fantastic handling that I cannot get over. Like, it's so good. Blows my mind. But anyway, just cruising along on a nice, you know, straight road here. It's also very nice, but that's no fun. This car deserves to be on a corner every single minute. It's just, that is where this thing feels amazing, and that's where it thrives. But anyway, I'm gonna drive this car around all afternoon. It's a beautiful sunny day. This is gonna be so much fun. And then I'll come back and give you guys my updated impressions. So I've been driving this car around all afternoon, and man, is it fun. One thing that's really outstanding about all S2000s is the sense of speed. I mean, because of how you sit close to the windshield and the hood drops down, for some reason this car, it's just such a visceral sense of speed where it just, I mean, everything's just shooting at you. You feel like you're going way faster than you actually are. And I can't remember the last time where I felt a sense of speed like this, where it's just like everything's blurred in your peripherals and it's just like you feel like you're going so fast in one of these, even when you're just doing 40 miles an hour. It's actually, it's that even adds to the experience. It's really a great car, but one thing that I've discovered in my driving over the past few hours here is the high-speed stability is a little bit lacking, and I don't know, that could possibly be because of the tires. It's actually running a different brand of tire on the front as it is on the rear. That might not be helping things, but I feel like it's even beyond that. It's just like, it needs a little more higher speed stability. I'm going through corners at faster speeds and it's not quite as buttoned down as I would like. You know, most sports cars, especially purpose-built sports cars like this one, are very buttoned down and sharp and give you confidence in corners. And this, it's very quick and agile in corners, but almost too much so that you're worried that it's going to get a little loose. And for the AP2 generation here, they actually retuned the suspension to have less oversteer than the first generation. So you would think that this would even feel more buttoned down, maybe a little less dramatic than the first generation in the corners. But the fact of the matter is, this actually feels a little more jittery to me than the first generation does. And this is adding to my list of things that I like better about the first generation than the second generation here. Obviously, the changes are minute, kind of, you know, picking things apart, you know, a little bit too much probably, but you can definitely tell that this is a little less of the experience. I missed the slightly higher red line. I mean, 8,000 is still amazing, but that 9,000 was just out of this world. And so I kind of missed that a little bit, because the thing is, another change they made for the AP2 was that they revised the gearing in the car. So gears 1 through 5 are shorter now, but gear 6 is taller for highway cruising since there's a little bit of extra torque. But I find myself, like, the gears don't last quite as long. It don't pull as long, obviously, because of the shorter red line. So you have to shift more often, which isn't a pain in this car. But I like that you can leave it in a gear in the first generation. You can stay in that gear a little bit longer in the corners and stuff. And I miss that feature about it. Speaking of the torque, I don't know if it was worth it. You know, they decreased the RPM, you know, the red line from 9,000 to 8,000, which is a big loss of a whole 1,000 RPM rev band. And in exchange, you got 6% more torque. I mean, it went up by 9 pounds-feet of torque, which to me doesn't even seem worth it. I mean, you can get 9 pounds-feet of torque out of probably an exhaust and an intake in this car. I don't know why they didn't just do that for people that wanted the more powerful torque. And so, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's very fun. It's still an amazingly fun car. And if there was no such thing as a first generation of this car, I would be singing this car's praises all day. But, you know, compared to the first generation, I mean, I would say the second generation looks better. It's obviously more modern looking and a little bit sharper. But I like the mechanicals and the handling of the first generation a little bit better, I think. And so yeah, I didn't expect that. I really expected this to be better in every way than the first generation, and I came out of this kind of feeling the exact opposite. So definitely let me know what you think about these. I mean, I have friends that have these AP2 S2000s and I love them. I have friends that have AP1 S2000s and I love those as well. They're both spectacular. You can't go wrong with either one. But if I had my pick, I would definitely go for the first generation. So, huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for hooking me up with this car again to review for you guys. I'm really glad that I was able to review the second generation as well. Now I feel like I have a well-rounded, full experience of all the S2000 years. And I still think that, you know, the flaws aside, this is still one of the best cars of recent times, probably in the top 10 cars of the 2000s for sure. One of the things that's most amazing about these is just how long they last. I mean, this one only has 67,000 miles on it, but many of these have well over 100,000 miles. Some of them almost 200,000 miles, and they still run like a top, which is amazing. I mean, you look at Boxsters, you know, or any other sports cars from any other companies. How many of them last 200,000 miles? It's a shame that Honda never worked on a successor, because I think that a successor to this would have been mind-blowing. If you put modern technology in a car like this, it would be amazing. But unfortunately they didn't. But anyway, let me know what you think about the review. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.